Devin. How are you?
Good. How are you? Hi,
Good,
Rooshy.
good,
Hi,
good.
Devin.
So, how's Atlanta right now? It's raining here in New York. So,
It's
what's the weather?
95 degrees and beautiful.
Awesome.
Jealous over here. It
Well,
Yeah,
it
just got
rained for the last 2 weeks, like the last 2 weeks straight, so we needed this.
yeah.
you
Okay.
deserve it, Devin.
Right.
Totally.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys for joining. If you're just tuning in, and generally, if you're new to our series, Sidebar, I'm Erin Carpenter. I'm the founder of Nude Bar. And we have this series once a month where we go live and we have these sidebar conversations about various topics. And today's topic is going to be about colorism and cultural appropriation in the fashion and beauty industry. And so I have my friends here to kind of chat about their opinions and their experiences with that and their journey. So why don't we'll go around and do some introductions so everybody kind of knows like where you guys are coming from in the industry, in the space. Rushi, you can go first.
Sure. Thank you, Erin. Hi, everyone. My name is Rooshy Roy. I am the co-founder and CEO of Aavrani. We're a holistic skincare brand inspired by ancient ingredients used in India for centuries. So all natural solutions using ingredients like tea tree oil, turmeric, rosewater, almond oil, basically the ingredients that I learned to use from my mother and grandmothers growing up, translated in a modern prestige format for everyone to use, ready-made. We launched our brand just last August, and so we've been growing and thriving since. We're excited to create a new category within beauty and, of course, have important conversations like this to understand really how to navigate it from the perspective of an entrepreneur and founder.
Awesome. All right.
I'm Devin McGhee. I am the CEO and co-founder of Deon Libra, which is an adaptogenic beauty brand focused on wellness for Black bodies. For me, we are community first and education first. So a lot of people in our community just don't know what adaptogens are and how healing they can be, even from the inside out, how they affect your skin, your mental health. And so we were really focused on building community and educating people about the benefits of adaptogens and just taking care of yourself in general. We launched our editorial website in February, and we will launch product hopefully in winter 2021. That's phase two for us.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Thank you. All the good juju. All the good juju.
We'll
Yes,
manifest
yes,
it.
Thank
yes.
you.
All right. Okay. So, love that you guys are both in beauty, but coming from different perspectives. And would just love to hear from you guys, like, what has it been like to be a Black and brown woman in your industries? And is it a daily struggle? Is there something that kind of inspires you and, helps you to keep going, especially in light of some of those struggles? And if you do, deal with imposter syndrome, how do you deal with that?
I'm happy to take a stab at going first. It's a very heavy question. I feel like we can talk about that for this whole hour.
Listen.
Yeah.
Um, I think the fact that it is a struggle to navigate sometimes is more validation for the fact that our products and this category is so needed. It's because
Hmm.
it doesn't exist, and by nature of being one of the first brands to try to enter that space and in very many ways create the space altogether, there's naturally just a lot of pushback or extra hurdles that you have to overcome because people are just so comfortable with the status quo. It's human
Hmm.
nature. So I try my best to not think about it. Of course, like that's so much easier said than done, as day to day there are always circumstances and situations that will remind me of who I am, like on the physical level and how I appear externally. But I'm that and keeps me keeps me focused on the intention behind building this thing, which is creating the new category and reminding myself that that's kind of what I'm signing up for and the reason why I'm doing it to begin with.
Nice.
Yeah,
I think for
that
me,
definitely resonates with me as far as, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I think there's a delay. Go ahead. It's totally fine.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that resonates with me as far as, being this like category definer and people not necessarily, understanding in the beginning with what you're building. Because, for Nude Bar, even as we've thought about going into retailers and things of that nature, there's often, this educational piece we have to give them on what real representation looks like. Our
Mm-hmm.
brand is very focused on skin tone diversity and body and shape and celebrating, what inclusion really looks like in our world. And a lot of times when you're not othered or haven't been othered, you have no idea how that feels. And so a lot of times we have to do a lot of educating to get them there. Or there's, the other piece of the spectrum where maybe they just don't care enough about it to even embark on those conversations or to include other body types and skin types. So, that definitely resonates with like the challenge of being this category defining company and really fighting for what you believe in. But at the same time, people don't always understand what that's like and what that means. But go ahead with what you were going to say, Devin.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think for us, the biggest challenge, especially like entering that beauty slash wellness space, is that when we sit down and have conversations with people, it's like, do Black bodies care about this? Like, do they want adaptogens? Do they want to take these things? And I think for us, historically, the wellness space hasn't been very Black friendly. I always say it's very skinny, feminine, and white. And everything's very muted, and our branding is very opposite of that. Like, it's loud, it's reds, it's blacks, because I think wellness should be fun. But I think the only piece missing is for us is the education piece. Nobody ever took the time to teach us these things. And so instead of waiting for somebody to include us on our end, it was just like, why don't we just build the brand that we feel like we need?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I
Yeah.
think that's so important to acknowledge because by nature of not needing these things, like always being included,
Right.
you can't possibly empathize with what it feels like to navigate beauty, never feeling like you've been represented fully.
Correct.
So the education piece is like also demanding a level of empathy and emotional intelligence on investors, retailers, whoever you're trying to get you to the next level. It's an uphill battle, but one that is, it gets easier and easier as more of us are trying to do it.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you guys, I mean, with all of that in mind, do you guys have the imposter syndrome struggle at any points in your day to day or your journey? And it just like, how do you manage that on a day to day basis if you do?
For me, it's almost like every other day thing.
Mm.
Just like anything, you learn to do it and you do it for the first time. So I always compare it to like riding a bike. Like, you didn't know how to ride a bike when you came out the womb, and like you fell and you got up and you did it again until you could finally ride a bike without training wheels. And so for me, like, being a founder is the same thing. I
Hmm.
don't know what I'm doing half the time. I feel like I'm winging it, but I use my resources, which are people and books and Google like everyone else. And I find the answers. And if I can't find it through digging through, articles or books, I ask people. I think the biggest thing for me, and the biggest thing for my ego was like learning to ask for help. I'm
Yeah.
a Virgo and I'm a perfectionist, so I feel like I should have all the answers and everything should be perfect. And being a founder will teach you that that is the
Oh,
complete
yeah.
opposite of the truth. And then also remembering that I know about adaptogens, I consume them, they've changed my life, and realizing like I'm building this for other people. And I don't know if you guys know like our origin story, but my dad passed away from a massive heart attack in his sleep at 54 3 years ago. And
Wow.
we found out it was stress induced. And as I started to search for natural solutions on my own stress management journey, I came across adaptogens and I was like, wait, why isn't anybody teaching us this? Because 90% of disease and illness is formed from stress. And so for me, when I remember that, hey, like, you're not really building this for you, you know what you're doing. Like, this is a part of your everyday life. You're building it for other people. that keeps me going, because I remember that there's a whole world of people that have no idea, in some instance, how to take care of themselves.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with that.
Thank you.
As it relates to the imposter syndrome specifically, I think that I've come to a point now, like I've been working on this for just over 4 years now. And so I've come to a point to realize that um, the special thing about being an entrepreneur is not that you necessarily know any more than anyone else. Like when you're starting, it's that you you have the courage to try and start
Mm-hmm.
it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the thing that you can't necessarily compare yourself to, or there's no like tangible like validation of the courage, right? So it feels like we want to latch on to other things that make us feel like we belong and we know what we're doing, except we don't know what we're doing by nature of being an entrepreneur. So it's this like catch 22 thing that I think it was important for me to break, of like understanding I am never going to feel like I've got it figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm growing and actually making progress, then I never should know what it feels like to like just relax and be complacent suddenly, like everything's cool. That's just, you're never going to get there, you're never going to feel there. So better to just get at peace with that, and then just try to know that it's always just there with you, and get comfortable with it.
Yeah. I think for me, it's like before pandemic, going into rooms often or every time where I'm the only Black or brown person there is one of those like disappointing feelings of
Yeah,
not feeling welcome. Are you really supposed to be there?
like you
Kind
have
of
something
thing.
more to prove.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
I mean, there's been rare moments like when I first met you, Rushi, where we were at like a pitch type
Yeah,
of competition, and but I was drawn to you because I was like, oh my gosh, another brown
someone, yeah, I
woman,
know, the closest
and that's
thing.
like that's so unusual. But that doesn't happen often, and hopefully there'll be more spaces for diverse humans, at least in the category of entrepreneurship, but I mean, everything is kind of segmented anyway. Do you guys have, like, when you think back to your childhood and your childhood experiences, are there any brands that you idolize, that you really looked up to growing up? And, did that in any way negatively impact how you viewed your skin and your skin tone, or just, your perspective on body image?
I mean, yes, the like resounding yes of I've never really felt represented in brands that I idolize. So, in many ways, I mean, I grew up in a suburb of Detroit. I was born and raised there, and I never felt like I saw anyone that looked like me in the media, people who were idolized in terms of my friends and community at school, and after school activities, all of that. Nobody looked like me. So I almost like became normalized to not seeing myself represented in things, and it became a normal thing to for me to aspire to look like someone with blonde hair and blue eyes, and just constantly feel this sense of lack or needing to improve or change things to one day look like that person.
Mm-hmm.
So it really just took a lot of, I guess, internal work, and then of course starting Aavrani helped me take more pride in my identity and who I am and what I look like. But that was definitely a challenge to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in South Florida, and I went to private school my whole life, so I'm almost always used to being the only Black person in the room. I wouldn't necessarily say that there were brands that affected how I viewed myself, but just environments. Because you'd walk in a room and it's like, oh, she speaks so well. Well, I'm educated just like you are. My dad's not a drug dealer. That's another thing. It's like, well, what does your dad do? And it's like, is your dad an athlete? Is he a rapper or a drug dealer? No, my daddy went to Harvard. And so having to kind of show people and prove, I don't want to use the word prove, but prove that like Black people look different ways and we do different things, and like we all don't speak slang, or like we're not all hood, like if that's the word that they want to use for it, and trying to change their expectations of like what people who look like me look like, and kind of rid them of the stereotypes. I think that was probably the hardest part. And then even when you are in the room with other Black women, or I feel like most of my female cousins are all light skinned, there's only a few of us that are chocolate. And so realizing like growing up and like the boys paying them more attention than they paid me, it never really bothered me. But in hindsight, I'm like, well, damn, was I affected by that as a child? Because it was like, I didn't want to be light skinned, but it was like, well, the light skinned girls have the pretty hair and the long hair. Like, luckily I was pretty and I had long hair and all those things. But there was always that, like, there's somebody above you because of what their physical features look like. Their skin's a little lighter, their hair's a little straighter, it's not as coarse or it's not as thick. So it wasn't really brands, but more environments.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, I remember so I'm from the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and it's kind of in a way a bit segregated where there's like a lot of Black people in certain neighborhoods, and then there's kind of a lot of white people in certain neighborhoods. And I grew up with a lot of successful Black people around me. Like my friends' parents were doctors and lawyers, and that was my norm. In my schools, elementary to high school, it was the opposite of you guys' experience, where there was usually like one white kid in the entire school, which was very interesting to grow up around and very special. But then when I went off to college, it was the reverse, and a little bit of a culture shock for me to get used to that type of environment. But as a child, I remember, I didn't really grow up necessarily aspiring to be like a white person as the, prototype of what beauty is, because I was around so many beautiful brown women and brown people that generally looked like me. But I remember like the Just for Me commercials when those first came out. I thought those were like so cool because that was the first commercial that I saw brown girls that looked similar to me. Because a lot of times in media, you would see, if you saw Black people, it would be like a really light skinned person with, either like perfectly curled hair,
Right.
or really long straight hair, like what you described, Devin, or she would be like this Naomi Campbell kind of look, like darker skin, but like supermodel, like just stunning. And I didn't really feel like I fit into either of those perspectives of what a Black woman looked like. And so the Just for Me commercials, I felt like, wow, those girls in that commercial, like they kind of look like me. And I really was drawn to that. But when I was growing up, Limited Too was really popular. But I don't remember any Black girls being in those campaigns.
Ever.
No, never.
Never.
Yeah, I mean, but it was like very popular where I lived. And then I remember even Benetton, United Colors being a big one. But still, it was kind of the same thing where that like typical model, either dark skin that looked, that was really slim with like a certain look, or a light skinned Black girl that was like a specific look, were in those campaigns. So I don't know if they quite nailed it, but I did appreciate the little bit of diversity that they added in comparison to other brands that that I grew up experiencing and really being excited about. I guess in terms of like skin tone and how it affected me, I guess the biggest experiences that I remember were like lived experience, not necessarily seeing a brand or in commercial. I guess you could say is associated with a brand, but I remember in my earlier 20s shopping a beauty brand that's like very high end and luxury, and wanting to have something from that brand, because as young people, sometimes you want to have special designer things.
Right.
And so I remember color matching for my foundation shade, and then being like, well, this is the only brown shade we have, and like you're the darkest option. And I was like, really? I'm the darkest
Yep.
option? And not to say that, like, they said it in such a negative way, that I was just very taken aback from that, because I was like, there are other beautiful hues that are darker than me that are gorgeous. Like, how could you not have other options that this is the darkest option. And, of course the undertones were a little weird and all this stuff, but that shopping experience, like even for me, and I ended up buying whatever it was, but even for me was so bad that I kind of thought about, wow, I wonder what other women that don't fit into whatever this one darkest shade is, like, what are they doing? And how it just felt so, I felt so excluded from what seemed to be something magical that I wanted to experience. And I just remember that experience being so terrible and really negative. Um,
That's
I,
so funny that it's
yeah.
with foundation specifically, because I had a very similar experience growing up.
Same.
It was like my friend's 13th birthday party, and as part of that, we all got makeovers at Sephora.
Mm,
And then my mom gave me some money, and I thought I would buy some of the makeup stuff so I could do it myself after. And for me, they blended 3 different foundations together, and I thought that was normal. Like I wasn't paying attention to anything else. But then after, they give you all the products to buy, because when they're like, here's what I used on your face. And I was like, that's so unfair that I have to buy 3 of them.
Really?
And everyone else gets to just buy 1. These are so expensive. Why am I the only one that needed that? That's so strange. And that was only at 13. So it was just like a constant reminder that you don't naturally belong there. You can squeeze your way in or fit in, adjust it, whatever it is, but there's nothing for you. In the same way that, like, I never saw Rooshy on a personalized anything at the store. Like little
mhm.
things like that, they add up over time. In isolation, they're not a big deal, but it's just micro reminders that, like, you don't belong there.
Yeah. 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 Do you feel like, because I know, Rushi, you were touching on, through building your brand, it's made you have more pride in your culture, but was there ever a period that you remember specifically, maybe it was that makeup experience where you felt like you didn't like your culture or you fell out of love with it in some capacity? And other than your developing your business, like what was the one, moment that made you so proud of who you are and where you come from?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. That's a really important question, because I sort of came to terms with it as I was in those initial phases of even creating an outline of what the business could be.
Mm,
And one of the most iconic skincare traditions in India is a haldi mask, and it's haldi is turmeric in Hindi, and it's just turmeric, and it's a mixture of some oils and rose water. They have various nuances to it, but turmeric is the standout ingredient. And it's used in our cooking and in our personal care. And so growing up in a very traditional Indian household, my mom would make traditional Indian food every night, and we would eat with our hands like a traditional Indian cuisine would be eaten. And in 4th grade, I remember it was the first day of 4th grade, and the popular girl who was sitting next to me, who I was so excited about sitting next to me, but then very quickly she looked at my hands and was like, ew, that's disgusting. I think you have fungus on your hands. And I was like terrified, because I look at my hands, and also my left hand's fine because we eat with our right. And then my right hand is completely like this yellow orange ombre color that it never occurred to me. I wasn't like into doing nails or even thinking about my fingernails until this person made me feel so gross and dirty for it. And
mm,
that was the first time that I just realized, when I got home, when my mom was serving dinner, that like the chicken that she had made was like bright orange, and I'm like, oh my god, that's what's doing this to me. I hate this. And I just started using a fork from then on, and I just never said anything about it. My parents didn't really ask, and I never really thought about it again until I started building Aavrani. And I was like, wait a second, now I'm sharing this like ready to use turmeric mask that doesn't stain, and it's going beyond the South Asian woman. Like East Asian, Caucasian, Black women are loving it. And I suddenly felt so proud of my culture and the use of turmeric. And it was very shocking to me, because it was a 360 completely from that one childhood experience.
yeah. Ah, that breaks my heart.
Right?
No, but it's all good now. Like these things, I mean, it almost has to happen for you to realize sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think about these things a lot as like I have a 2-year-old daughter and I think about her experiences so much and who she's going to be around and how certain things that might be said to her that might make her feel away. So I don't know. That's why I feel like sensitive about it. But but do either of you remember just the first time you saw someone that looked like you in media? Like I mentioned the Just For Me commercial, but yeah, like did you have any of those experiences where you were like, wow, finally someone that looks like me?
I think for me, it was probably like when Destiny's Child was like starting to really take off.
Mm,
And to me, like everybody's like Beyonce, Beyonce, like I love Beyonce. Beyonce's fucking fabulous. But like to look at Kelly and be like, oh shit, like there's a black girl who's just as dark as I am and she's killing it. And like that would Destiny's Child wouldn't be Destiny's Child without like all of them.
hmm
And so to look at her and be like, oh shit, like I can still do things, great things, and be fabulous and be pretty and be in the front and be seen and have solos, not I'm not a singer by any means, but have solos and like be the star of something, like that's still possible. Because I really do think, like, I was born in 1990. So like in the 90s, the only really dark skinned women that were put in the forefront of anything were supermodels, your Naomi Campbell's. And so I didn't see somewhat of a regular person, although Kelly's not a regular person, that looked like me doing anything. But to see like them on MTV Cribs and like she lived a normal life just like the rest
hmm
of us, but she was beautiful and like nobody tried to hide the fact that she was chocolate and dark skin and she was also talented. And so like you can be all of the things.
hmm Yeah, awesome.
For me, I mean, I don't remember any one person actually, and I was thinking about like why is that it doesn't stand out because it seems like it should because I would get very excited when I would see a brown person like cast in a TV show or in a movie. It was always like not even a tertiary character, like someone with 1, 2 scenes, but then seeing them like, oh, the smart kid in math that's
Mm,
sitting behind so and so, or like seeing the Indian kid in Mean Girls, like that was I was just like, oh my gosh, my heart would just jump because there was this like feeling of like, oh my God, someone that's representing where I come from, like that's just like me. And it was always a side kind of character and never anyone really stand out in the forefront of anything until my 20s when I saw Priyanka Chopra starring in Quantico and I was like, oh my gosh, on network television there's an
yeah.
Indian woman, and it was wild. I was like in my mid 20s when that came out, and in many ways almost felt like I was past the point of um, feeling like prideful from it. You know what I mean? Like it was
Yeah.
just like a kind of like I've made my peace with the fact that I'm not going to feel represented or included in most things in life, kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
No, but I mean, in many ways, all of this fuels like my motivation behind building something like Aavrani because it's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, there are going to be little girls, and there are little girls who are me's all around seeing this, an interpretation of their culture and heritage that's celebrating it boldly with our bright colors as well for that same reason that this is
hmm
something we should be proud of and shout from the rooftops, like not something that you have to feel self-conscious about.
Yeah,
Yep.
totally. Yeah. Do you guys think appropriation of culture can go as far as replicating physical body features or like your appearance? I mean, for me, it's a strong yes, but yeah.
It's a fuck yes for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I struggle with that a little bit. Not struggle personally, but it annoys me to see because there's lots of people, especially very famous people, who wouldn't speak up for Black people in situations where we need allies.
hmm
Um, but you pay thousands upon thousands of dollars to get the same ass that you made fun of Black women for, or to
Yeah.
get the big lips that you made fun of Black women for. And to me, that's annoying as fuck, because it's like you never accepted those people for who they were your whole life. And now it's like, oh, that's what people like. Let me go do that.
Hmm.
So it's okay for you to pay for that, but it's not okay for the people who were born that way. So that
Yeah.
shit always annoys me.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. Same. Ugh. Yeah. Um, it's interesting because, well, at least for our brand, um, and I bring this up a lot, like when I pitch investors, because they always wonder, like, how are you going to compete with this person and this person? And I explain that feeling of cultural appropriation and how there's a large community base that is very against that and supporting that in various ways. So yeah, so I think about that all the time. Like it definitely resonates. And yeah, and it is frustrating as a Black woman, and I think even like um, growing up, especially as a dancer in ballet, a lot of times those are features that I was always trying to hide because I was in a space where a certain body type was preferred for that industry. So it's just very interesting to
Mm.
see the evolution of um, appropriation, cultural appropriation with the body in that perspective. Because, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that, where brown girls have not wanted attention for certain body parts growing up or have been teased about them and in various ways. So yeah.
I'm still that way. And it's not, I think it's a subconscious thing, but I still find myself going or like entering certain rooms and wanting to make sure like I won't be seen for certain body parts. Like I
Mm.
can't help it that I'm bottom heavy and I'm curvy and I have thick legs, but I still find myself like in certain situations it's like maybe I should wear something a little looser. And it's not that it's inappropriate, it's just that I don't want the attention on my
Hmm.
body parts when I have something to say. Like there's more to me than what you see physically. And
Yeah.
it sucks because you grow up hiding those things. And then as an adult, when it's like, hey, I should be celebrating my body as a woman through every stage of life, it's like, wait a minute, I don't want to be seen.
Hmm.
So
Mm.
it's really weird. It's really weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that I do the same thing a lot in like professional settings where I want to be taken serious.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm always like very thoughtful about like I am wearing a shirt, by the way, everybody. I'm like realizing that because I have on a certain shirt, it looks like I'm naked, but I do have on
Well,
clothing.
that would really make the point, wouldn't
Right.
um, but as as like BIPOC centered brands or focused brands, what do you guys do as a brand to make your customers feel seen and heard? Like, are there specific things that you're doing that you felt like you didn't see in other brands, but that you're really intentional about with your brands, so that yeah, so that people feel seen?
Yeah, I would say it's like, so my whole experience with the appropriation and that kind of thing has been just other people using or celebrating the Indian heritage in a
Hmm.
way without giving any credit to it. And I think
Yep.
the biggest example of that now is yoga, with how big it's gotten. A lot of
Mm.
people don't even know that it's an in ancient Indian tradition at all anymore. It's become so branded towards like your Upper East Side Lululemon wearing person. You know what I mean? Like it's just like so detached from it now, which is also a byproduct of how robust it is and how pervasive it is around the world, which is beautiful. So sometimes I'm conflicted internally of like, okay, in order to actually make this a thing that's global and celebrated all around the world, is am I going to be able to preserve all the complexity behind it? Right? Like there's a natural dilution of the authenticity as the brand scales, and how much am I willing, how far am I willing to go with that? Right? And that's something that's I'm always thinking about, because it's like, on one hand, yes, I do want everybody knowing what turmeric is and what it's good for and that you should consume it, all that kind of stuff. But I do think it's important for people to understand where the history behind this stuff and where it comes from, so that we can all just sort of understand each other better. Like when we have no idea where these things come from, it's hard to appreciate other people's lived experiences and points of view. You maintain like a kind of an ignorance to all of that, while also, you know, using all the benefits and beautiful things that have transcendent cultures, really, but came from Black and Brown communities. So yeah, I just, something I think about all the time as we grow the brand.
Yeah. Yep. Um, so a couple of months ago, we did a mental health awareness sidebar chat, and one of the people that we had on did talk about that, how, you know, she's a yoga teacher, and the spiritual yoga, not the fitness yoga, and she just like really, you know, broke down the differences. And yeah, I mean, it's such a commercialized thing now. But even, I mean, that's one example. But do you guys ever have friendships or personal associates that you notice appropriating culture, and like, do you confront them on it, and like, how do you set those boundaries, you know, around that? So you know, yoga could be an example, and just like, you know, what, you know, where it comes from, and do you ever embark on those deeper conversations with those friends or associates? But in you know, same for you, Devin, is there anything that any person you hang out with that you realize all of a sudden, like, you're making me uncomfortable with how you're appropriating my culture?
Not anymore. I think when I
Mm,
was younger, it was harder to have those conversations. So I happened to be in the past a person that would like bite my tongue just so everybody else can kind of be at peace.
mm,
Um, and I think I'm fortunate enough to say now that I don't really have those people in my circles, but I do have a 17-year-old brother who is half Black, half Korean.
mm,
And when I hang out with him and his friends, and like I'm listening to them or overhear them, and I hear the N word, and like I know that my 17-year-old brother is like half Black, half Korean, but you're still Black. So I'm like, does this affect you? Like, and we've had those conversations,
mm.
and he's like, it's just what we do. We would fight you back in our day if you were white and you used the N word, but they use it so casually.
Mhm.
And so I think when I'm with younger people, it's a little bit harder to adjust to this Gen Z vibe where everybody is just so free. And I love that for their generation. But like there's still boundaries. The N word for me will always be a boundary, especially coming out of the mouth of a white person.
Yeah.
Um, you know, even down to songs. Like if you were ever in the car with white people and a song that we all know is gonna come on and that word's gonna come on, everybody's like immediately looking at the white person like, you better fucking not. It's a
Yeah.
no, right? And so now I think as an adult, I've been fortunate enough to surround myself with people who kind of know those boundaries,
Mhm.
um, and will ask questions when things are uncomfortable. But definitely my younger self dealt with that a lot growing up as like the token Black girl in many spaces, and people being like, it's just a word, or like, can I touch your hair? Absolutely not. Like those types of things. And like now I have braids and you want braids. Like, sis, we're not the same. We can't do the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Ugh. Oh, this life.
This life.
Um, so what would be, you know, one takeaway, that kind of going back to, you know, how you make your customers feel, you know, through your brand, but what would be one takeaway that you both would want your customers to have with your brand and your mission, and just like how you want it to resonate in the world, from a legacy perspective?
Yeah, so for me, the whole look and feel and aesthetic with the brand was rooted in this idea of celebrating tradition but challenging expectations. One of the challenges that I felt growing up was when I would see some Indian inspired something, which was very rare to begin with, but when I would see it, it would all have the same look and feel and interpretation of the culture. So I'm talking about like jewel tones, gold accents, details, all that kind of stuff, which is beautiful and I love, and it does remind me of the culture, but it's not me, it's not Rooshy. And so as I was creating the Aavrani brand, I wanted to interpret the beauty of Indian culture, but through my own lens of the Indian American lived experience. And as I was creating it, I realized it was like I had always felt like I was either Indian or American and allowed to be this like sum of the parts kind of person, whereas we shouldn't be treating that in that way. Like my own Indian Americanness has its own wholeness and oneness, and that's its own one unique lens. And how do I showcase that through the brand, through a modern perspective? And so therein comes the sort of contemporary art driven focus with the bold colors and just the opposite of what you would expect to see from an Indian inspired brand, so that we can make the point that, you know, there is multitudes to not just the culture, but to women, to people. You don't need to be boxed into any one thing or to what other people expect you to be or want you to be in order to be understood. You can do your own thing and still succeed in that vein. So that's what I would want our customers to feel and remember about Aavrani.
Love it.
Awesome. I kind of resonate with Rooshy. For us, our packaging, our product hasn't launched yet. So the one clue I will give you is there's lots of red.
Nice.
And so when we were kind of building the brand in the early stages, I was doing these surveys and we got like over 2,000 responses. And I just like would throw out colors and just say like, how does this make you feel? And like when we went through the surveys and we got to the color red, people that were not Black were like, it makes me feel enraged, afraid. But like all of the responses from Black people were super positive. It was like, it makes me feel bold, makes me feel accomplished, it makes me feel sexy, makes me feel confident, it makes me feel empowered, it makes me feel safe. And I was like, okay, well, we're definitely going with red because that was the most positive response we had received out of all the colors. And then I also think, same as like Rooshy was saying, Black beauty products always look Black. It's like this African looking font. And it's like very African inspired. And like, I'm sure my ancestors are somewhere in Africa, but I'm not from Africa. I've never stepped foot in Africa a day in my life. And so I think making all Black beauty brands, whether it be hair care or skincare or makeup, look Black to me is like played out for me. I think we deserve for everything to be beautiful and luxe and aesthetically pleasing as like any other brand. Why are we always settling for certain packaging? Why is our shit clear with the label or white with the label? Like, why don't we get the custom things too? And so for me, like, I want people to always remember when they use our brand, it's like, you're worthy of the best. Whether like you're worthy of like the best self-love, you're worthy of the best love, you're worthy of the best wellness products, you're worthy of the best skincare products, because a lot of Black beauty products are toxic. And no one's taking the time to give somebody a Black brand that like looks really good and feels really good in your hand and is really good for your skin and doesn't have toxic ingredients. And like, you want to take pictures of your photos and have all the shelfie photos. And so for me, that was really important. Why do we always have to get, you know, the short end of the stick when it comes to the aesthetics or when it comes to the actual ingredients? And so I couldn't find the brand that was giving me everything that I wanted in a product. So I was like, fuck it, I'll just go build it myself and people will have it.
Yeah, love that.
Love it. Yeah, love it. If you were talking to a brand that is ignoring BIPOC customers, what would you say to them?
You're
Keep
missing
ignoring
the fuck out.
it so we
right,
can
like
grow.
you're missing the fuck out. Right. Like that's it. That's all I have to say. You're lost. That's it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Same. Totally. Like nothing to talk about here. You're
Yeah,
lost.
now that we're
Everything is
building it,
inspired
it's
by
a
people of
conflict of
color.
interest.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't care to help you diversify anymore. Like, you can't do it. I got it. Don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
you're doing just fine. Keep doing
Right.
Yeah.
that.
You're doing great, sweetie.
What does progress look like to you? How can you measure like large scale industry change and improvements? And yeah, how are you guys viewing that?
Ooh, that's a
Um,
good question. Um, so for me, like one of the things as I was thinking about the just macro environment of skincare and just beauty at large, um, the trend that was really inspiring to me was the Korean beauty trend or K beauty
Mm-hmm.
phenomenon of those ingredients and products growing in popularity in the US. I was like, okay, so people are open and willing to try something that's totally different than what they're used to or ever seeing before. Maybe there's a shot they're willing to do that with the Indian culture as well. And then as I was building out the brand and everything, it was just like I want it to be bigger than just like an Indian thing. I want it to represent what the actual product and intention is. I don't want people to know
Mm-hmm.
it because it's Indian. I want people to know it because it's the best, that it's
right.
wonderful and it's good for them, even if they're not Indian. And so we have sort of not rebranded, but are repositioning ourselves as the holistic beauty brand, one that comes with the intention of mind, body, soul, that it's not just the products you apply, but your mindset, your exercise, your nutrition, all of those things affect how you look and feel. And we want to be that beauty brand that concedes that for the first time, that doesn't give people this sense of you need this, you need that, you're always lacking in something. I would love for people to know us as that holistic brand. And that would be success to me if we can transcend that uh, labeling beauty brands by like their heritage only, because they're so much bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think for us, it I think it falls more into like the education piece. Like, it's great if you buy something, please buy everything when it launches, but I rather teach you of how to take care of yourself. And so for me, it's like if we teach one person one thing and like they have a meatless Monday or they drink an adaptogenic tea at night before bed, that's my end goal. Like, how can we change people's lives? Because let's just be honest, everybody can't afford to buy everything they want all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how are we still helping people without taking their money? That's really important to me as well. And I think it's a little personal because our brand is based on my father's death. Deon was his middle name and Libra was his zodiac sign. And so, for me, I rather tell everybody adaptogens and you never buy anything from me at all about adaptogens, you never buy anything from me at all, then you buy everything and hate it. And so I think one thing we also combat a lot when we speak to investors is like, well, it's only for Black people. No, that's not the case. My focus is just Black people because within the wellness space, nobody is speaking to us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what's most important on our end.
Yeah.
The irony of that too, of um, like it's only for Black people or calling out the nicheness of it, that is how you build a powerhouse brand. Something
Thank
that's
you.
it feels exclusive, that's niche, that attracts people who wouldn't otherwise be engaged with what you're trying to do, right? And so
Right.
that is what makes a powerful brand in the long term. It's just that short term, you have to maintain your authenticity to stick it out and not just cave and try to be everything to everyone, because that never ends up working out anyway. So it's
Mm-hmm.
wild that even that's a response from investors or retailers. It's just
Literally.
like, that's what
All
you
the
should
time.
want, something
All
Yeah.
that's niche.
Are Black people going to buy adaptogens? I have like my 17-year-old cousin, no, my 13-year-old cousin, he's a boy here. And like I started him taking chlorophyll. So anytime I get a bottle of water and I put chlorophyll in it, they want it. And this morning, because they slept over last night, he was like, well, when does your product launch? Because he's like into his skincare and he's like a boy's boy. But like that just goes to show you that like all we're missing is the education piece. All we're
Yeah.
missing is for somebody to take the time and show you like these things are for you too. Like as a
Mm-hmm.
teenage boy, you should care about your skin. And so it's cool to see that like just me building this company is like shifting people around me, like their perspective on like what self-care looks like. at any age.
Yeah,
Totally.
love it. Yeah, for Nude Bar, I mean, there has been a lot of progress, I think, in the industry. When we first launched, so I founded Nude Bar in 2009, and then we launched in late 2011. We were the first brand to have all these different skin tones on the market. But at the time, we would still get a lot of like emails and calls for a few years on just like, hey, I want to get the nude color. Like, okay, tell me a little bit more about your skin. We have 12 options. And just like getting people to understand the concept that nude is individual and that that's okay. And it should be that way. It's taken a long time to get there. And I think the benefit that we've seen is that other brands have kind of come out and helped along with us redefine what nude looks like in a real way. I view that as progress. And I think ultimately my personal goal and mission is, one day, my daughter or whoever will be able to go in stores and find products that actually represent them. And they'll no longer have those negative experiences like when I bought that makeup foundation or like when Rooshy went to Sephora with her friends that feel so othering. Is one of my goals. And then also the fact that, typically when you think of nude in so many categories, whether it's shoes or band-aids or whatever, people instantly think of beige or white
Yep.
skin. And I'm hoping that that mental thought will just go away and we'll actually think about it more holistically, from an individual perspective overall. So if you walk into the nail salon and say, oh, I'm looking for a nude color, she's not just going to hand you the typical pink
Yeah.
option. She'll actually like consider like, well, what kind of nude is this person looking for? Are they looking for their nude or they look, and they'll kind of show you options based on that so I see some progression happening, but we still have a long way to go because I think people still instantly think of like that white beige color. So yeah, hopefully we'll get there soon. But
I didn't even think about that with the Band-Aids. Like, oh
yeah,
my gosh, that's wild.
it's
There was a
interesting
whole
because
brand that
yeah,
was making dark skin band-aids, and then the
mhm,
actual Band-Aid company just
came
started
out with
making darker nude band-aids, but there were entire brands that were only making different nude
Wow.
band-aids for that
yeah.
reason.
I'm their number one customer. The other companies, like when people come to my house and ask for a Band-Aid, and I give them this, actual nude. They're like, "Wow, where'd you get this from?" But yeah, I'm obsessed with things that come in diverse skin tones. But it's interesting. I was talking to my husband about that a while ago about, Band-Aid coming out with these other options. And growing up, it never dawned on him that the Band-Aid the idea is it's blending in with your
Yeah, that's
skin.
what I'm trying to say. I just learned this in this moment. Like, I can't believe I didn't realize that was what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, well, yeah, you don't want it to I mean, obviously
But
it
I mean,
looks,
it always stood out, and it's just
yeah,
like I got used to it. That's what it looks like. Like,
yeah, yeah. It always stood out on you, but
yeah,
probably not for who Band-Aid originally made it for,
right,
Was made
right?
right.
for, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, anywho, if you guys have any questions, drop them into the Q&A box. I don't have any questions yet, but feel free to jump in. We're gonna close this out pretty soon. So would love to hear from you guys if you have any questions for Rushi or Devin on this topic or yeah, anything around representation and we all firmly believe that it matters. So I can talk about this for hours. All right, because Sarah says, have you ever had an associate or friend who took knowing you and your culture too far through their actions?
All the time when you go to private school with mostly white people.
Okay.
All the time.
Yeah.
I think it's just like taking a white friend home for the first time and then like
Mm.
them getting used to like somebody being in the kitchen cooking with loud music or like what does that smell like, it's just food. Mom's cooking or auntie's cooking or whoever, and then once they get comfortable it's like you can hear like the twang change in their voice and how they're speaking and like they're using specific words and it's almost like it's a no for me. Like, no, bro. Like, just because you're in my space now and I'm not in your space doesn't mean you have to adapt. Like, you can sit here and absorb as much as possible and learn as much as possible. That doesn't mean you shift who you are because you're now in my space.
Yeah. Quick question on that. Um, do you ever feel, because I know this comes up a lot in the Black community, like code switching. Um, do you ever feel like you do that? And if you do code switch, and code switching essentially meaning like if you're in a white environment, you know, speak more proper. And then if you're in a Black environment, you may speak more loosely in your conversations. And in those scenarios where you might code switch, do you feel like that's cultural appropriation in some way? I mean, I view it as like it's just survival, but I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
kind of curious.
It's
I was gonna
survival.
say, yep. It's not even a thought. It's like,
Yeah.
It just
yeah.
happens. And for me, like, I stopped code switching a long time ago. I just realized just because I speak a certain way or we use the word occasionally, bitch, as like a term of endearment, doesn't make me any less brilliant or any less reliable or any less competent. And I feel like if I have to switch how I speak to survive in your environment, that environment is not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was consulting before I founded Deon Libra, I often used to say, like, either you fuck with me or you don't. And I meant that wholeheartedly, because why do I have to show up and be somebody else that I'm not 90% of my life to operate in your environment, and you get to be who you are 24/7, 365. And so for me, that was like me abandoning myself every time I code switch. And I was just like, fuck that. Like, it's not like you can't understand me.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I sugarcoating things for you or downplaying my brilliance or my thought processes or anything just because it makes you more comfortable? So I stopped doing it a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. Um, yeah, I find that when I'm showing up as my authentic self, people are more comfortable with me anyway. So, yeah, so I agree with you on just like it's
Yeah.
not worth it. But I
It's
think
just not.
that when you're younger and you're maybe less established in life, then you feel like you have to do those things to get to certain rooms and get to certain places, you know? So I don't know, it's a tricky balance, I guess. All right, any other questions out here? All right, let's see. Isa had a question. Say says rather. What is the best way to call out cultural appropriation? Um, yeah, because I mean, I agree with you where Devin, what you were saying earlier on, like it's easier to just not say anything because you want people to feel comfortable. Um, but I think it does take a lot of courage to like actually confront somebody. But yeah, like I guess in how do you typically go about that?
Um, for me, it's funny because like some random Facebook conversation I had with some girl 3 years ago, of some Dear White People post I wrote, which is just like going to school and like realizing all the people I grew up with have some form of racism like ingrained just in who they are.
Hmm.
And so I think like for me in college, I think that's when like Trayvon Martin was killed. And I went to school, I went to UCF. So Sanford is like 30 minutes from where I went to school. So we marched and we protested and we did all these things. And I grew up with white people that were just like, what is going on? Like, why are you doing this? He shouldn't have. And it's like, wait a minute. I don't give a fuck what he did. He deserves to go home and like give him his day in court. And so I also think it depends on the situation and depends on like my mood and like my personal energy at the moment. Some shit is just like a non-negotiable for me. So it
Hmm.
may come off a little raw and it may not be politically correct, but it's like hard stop. Hold up. Other things I have to sit with for a bit. Like it may just be like a one-off. They slipped up and maybe they just don't know any better. Maybe nobody ever educated them. Maybe they've never been in a room full of Black people or they've never been to dinner with the Black family. And so some of those things are reserved for private conversations like, hey, you made me feel this way.
Hmm.
And please don't ever say that again in my presence. And so I think it depends on your relationship with the person and how much you each care about each other, but taking the time to address it. It could be a one-off, it could be a habit. If I've already spoken to you about it and it's a habit, like we're done. Like I'm not going to keep repeating myself, because that means you don't care for me as a human, and how uncomfortable you make me feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, I mean, I would just say that like over time, I've shrunken my circle, so to speak, in terms of like who is worth my energy and whose opinions I value. Like it's just becoming smaller and smaller, and I hope it continues to go in that path, because I do think, especially with what we're trying to do as entrepreneurs, like really just like this level of greatness, you just cannot be distracted. And a lot of that distraction comes from reacting to ignorance and people around you who just don't get it. And it most of the time is not worth your time and attention. It's too valuable, it's too precious to be trying to educate someone else or condemn someone else. Like, fuck that. Like, you focus on you, kind of thing. And I've been trying to train myself to do that more and more. It's really the only way I've been able to be at peace with it, navigating it, right? Because otherwise it's just like you're exhausted at the end of every single day. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Well, 9 times out of 10 it's coming from somebody who also doesn't have the courage to like walk a day in like your shoes, or to take the risk that you're taking as a founder. So it's kind of like, okay, why are you
Yeah,
even opening your mouth?
right. And why should you care about their opinion? It's like
Right.
they're so beneath you at that point, you know?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 100% agreed. All right. Well, we're up on our time. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Rooshy and Devin, for your time and for chatting with me and having this sidebar. It means a lot, and I love this topic. I feel like I can go in another hour on so many other questions or topics related to this. But really excited that you guys made the time to chat, and hopefully we can do it again sometime soon. And
Definitely. Thank you for having us.
of
Yeah, I would
course, of
love that.
course.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good evening.